Welcome back to Gloved Up Garage. Well, I've got the 89 Coupe into the garage, and I'm ready to get rolling on this thing. As it stands right now, it's Wednesday night. There is a Cars and Coffee on Saturday morning, about 10 miles from here. I would love to be able to take this car up there to that Cars and Coffee. I think it'd be kind of cool to get it to run and drive and get it there. And given all the issues that this car has, I need to see if I can get it running or not, and kind of get an idea of what all is going on with this car before I take it any further than, 10 or 15 miles away. Some of the things that I know I'm going to need, just because of the fuel system being open, all of the injectors, the O-rings are all bad on those. So I've got a stack of parts over here that I'll show, but I've got all the O-rings and the pintle caps. I'm going to rebuild the injectors, clean those the best that I can. Put the intake back on. And then hopefully that'll button up the engine bay. I went ahead and got a new air filter. I've got new plug wires, new cap and a rotor, new plugs. So I'll get all that stuff changed out, tune up the engine the best that I can. I've also got a new belt. So hopefully we can get that swapped out and it doesn't break on us or anything like that. That's kind of the basics under the hood of what needs to be done. Once I do get it running, I'll do an oil change. That way I can get it warm, get the oil flowing back through the engine again. That'll give me an opportunity to get any kind of sludge or buildup or anything like that back into that oil before I drain it out. So this is the stack of parts that I have for the 89. Now this came with the car. This is the fuel tank cover. I haven't got the fuel tank out of the box, but that's a brand new fuel tank from Rock Auto. It's a Dorman brand. They're like $100, and I think it was like $15 shipping. Late Model Restoration sells them too for like $130, so that was kind of a wash. So I've got a brand new fuel pump. This is made by Sparta, which I did a little bit of research on Sparta fuel pumps. This is AC Delco bought Sparta. It's a U.S. designed pump, but they are manufactured in China. They're just designed here. So if this was going to be something that I really wanted a lot of longevity and stuff out of, I would go ahead and put a Walbro pump back in the car. Just get the hanger by itself and then the sock for the fuel pump and put a Walbro pump in there. This will be fine just to get it going. So I've got a new fuel sending unit for the gauge. We've got all our lock rings, which the fuel tank came with those also. I went ahead and got a set of Motorcraft wires just to make it look good because this car is so stock that I didn't want to mess with anything. I thought the Motorcraft wires would be a good addition. I've got a cap, a rotor. I've got a ignition switch that goes in the column just because I know how much of an issue those can be on these Fox bodies. 8 NGK spark plugs. Those were actually cheaper than the Motorcraft copper plugs. So NGK makes good plugs. I've used them for years. I've got a set to go in the Explorer ST. They'll be just fine for this 5-liter. I've also got all of the rebuild kits for the injectors. So I've got upper and lower O-rings and the pintle caps. That's what's in these boxes here, and I'll show you how to rebuild those injectors. We got a fuel filter, an air filter, PCV grommet, PCV valve, and then of course the belt. So this is all the parts that I'm going to be putting on this car. Now hopefully this will get me to the point where I can get it to start. I still need to pick up a battery for the car. I'll get that probably tomorrow. This is going to be like a multi-day video where hopefully it concludes with me driving this to that Cars and Coffee on Saturday morning. So I've got the filler neck grommet in, I've got the fuel pump, and I've got the fuel sending unit installed in the new tank. This tank is awesome. This has got like an epoxy coat or something on it. It's way better than the bare metal of the factory tanks. And again, this is the Dorman tank. They're like $100 on Rock Auto. So the way these things go in is obviously you've got a hole in the top of it, and you just drop the fuel pump in there. There's a, I don't know if you can tell where the fuel pump is sitting, not really. There's basically like a square rectangular part in here that the fuel pump, that sock drops into. You just kind of weave it into the hole, get it dropped in there. And then there's an O-ring that goes under the neck of the pump that goes against the tank. And then you just put this lock ring on there. You tap it with a hammer and a punch to get it to lock into place. Same thing with the fuel sending unit. It's got just a little O-ring goes underneath of it, drops into place, and then you're done. So the only other thing I need to do is transfer over the vent that goes right here. And then there's some like rubber pads that keep this from bouncing and causing vibration against the trunk floor that are on the old tank. So I'm going to carefully try to get those off. And if they won't come off, then I'm going to use them to make a template. I've got some rubber around here that's like a neoprene or really hard rubber, kind of like what you would see on a conveyor belt. And I can use that to put here on top of the tank and dampen some of the noise from this. And then I've also got some insulation left over from the 93 Fobra project. That's kind of like a Dynamat style insulation. And I can put that over top of this as well. It's not really something that I have to worry about coming off. It's, you know, stuck to the bottom of the trunk lid, or not the trunk lid, but the trunk floor. It's got nowhere that it can come off. So I'm going to work on getting that stuff transferred over and then come back when I got that done. So on second thought, I'm not going to try to take that stuff off. It's really, really compressed. It's stuck on there. It's going to tear just trying to get it off of there. But there's 3 pads that are roughly about 1/4 of an inch thick. One on the driver's side, this one in the middle, and then over here on the passenger side around where the fuel pump goes. So I'm going to carefully try to get the vent out and the grommet that holds the vent. But you can see this is one of the reasons I had to get rid of this tank and not use it. You know, all of this stuff around the filler neck is just completely rusted. There's a couple of spots like right there that's really, really bad. I don't want to reuse this tank and possibly clog up my new pump. Plus there's dirt and stuff in the bottom of this, rust. It's just not a good tank. We've got a new one. So I'm going to work on getting this out, getting it cleaned up, and then put it on the new tank. And then I'm going to come up with a solution for this. All right, I got the vent cleaned up. I've got the grommet cleaned up for the vent. Went ahead and wiped down this tube, and yeah, I didn't wear gloves. Mark that down on the calendar. But so I've got all this installed. Everything is ready to go. Now all I need to do is figure out what I'm going to do about those pads and then get those installed onto the tank, and then I'm ready to put this in the car. So this is the foam that I'm talking about. This is like a neoprene closed cell foam. This will go on top of the gas tank to keep it from, I guess, rattling against the floor, basically. I picked up a roll of this stuff from a local rubber supply. It was $11 for this, I don't know, 2 foot, or well, basically 4x4. So I made a template, laid those over there on the gas tank, the original one, and then just cut these out. So the next step to get those to stick, spray adhesive. And I'll just spray one side with the Super 77 spray adhesive, let it tack up, and then I'll stick it onto the tank. It'll be good to go. After a ton of struggling, I got the fuel pump in this thing, or the fuel tank. This beat me up, and I don't know what it was, but this tank just did not want to fit too well. I don't know if it's the fact that maybe that foam might be a little thicker than what's on there. If the floor of this thing is rusted and warped, I'm not really sure, but it took me about an hour to get this tank back up here into the car. And you can see there's a lot of scaly rust on this. There's nothing too terrible back here except for right here in the floor. There's this little spot it's a hole. I mean, it is what it is. We know this is rusted. Obviously, the frame up front's not any good, so there's going to be some bad spots back here in the back as well. Sorry, I'm sounding a little weird. I'm laying upside down. So now what I've got to do, I've got the tank in. I've got my lines in. I'm going to spin the camera around here and show you the filter in the front. So we've got the filter all mounted up here. All my lines are hooked up. And the next thing I need to do is get the filler neck and the gasket for the floor of the filler neck screwed up and fastened. So one thing I noticed while I was looking at this filler neck, and I'm sorry this is bouncing around. So this clamp right here holds the filler neck to the tank, and there should be a hole right about here for a bolt to go up through, and then go into this clamp. The factory tank has a hole there. This one does not. So I'll have to take some quick measurements and drill me a little like 1/4-inch hole to put this bolt back through. And then I can bolt up the seal that you see right there. And then from there I can go to the top side and finish everything in the filler neck. That pretty much will wrap up the fuel tank back here in the back. So then I can move up to the front. All right, I got the filler neck installed, completely tightened up. I just wanted to show you guys how original this thing is. I've never seen one of these before where the gas cap bolts into the filler neck. And before I put that in there, you could see the outline of this. So I know this is an original cap. I've just never seen one just like this before. And something cool that I noticed too, this has the electric door release on it, which I didn't know they put those on coupes. I thought they only did them on hatchbacks, but this car has it. So it looks like this thing had every option except for an automatic transmission. I've got rear window defrost, power windows, power mirrors, power locks, the power gas door release. We got AC. I found that it does have tilt steering. Somehow the knob that controls the tilt was laying on the floor by the seat, so I got that working. So this is one of those things that it's a little bit of a surprise. It's kind of cool. Let me show you what else I found that was a surprise. So I was going through the trunk and I'm looking for bolts, some of the stuff to put together the intake and stuff like that. So that's a little bracket that holds the upper to the lower, which is kind of hard to find. Most people took those off and tossed them because they're kind of a pain to get to. This was the biggest surprise. So like I had mentioned earlier, I ordered all the O-rings for the injectors because if you look down inside the fuel rail, you can see the O-rings, they're all stuck down inside there. Well, when I opened this Rock Auto box up, there's 8 little boxes in here. And I'm like, what the heck could that possibly be? And I opened one of the boxes up. Somebody bought brand new injectors for this. And I'm assuming it's the gentleman that I got the car from because his name's on that invoice there. But these are brand new injectors. So that's going to speed up the process of this project. Now I don't have to go through the process of replacing the pintle cap and replacing the O-ring on both ends. I could just slap some petroleum jelly on this thing and get these bolted in and get the rails bolted back down, get the intake back on, and this is going to move along much quicker than I thought. It's a good thing I took these injectors out and I bought those rebuild kits because every one of these pintle caps was broken. And this is the part where fuel kind of sprays out of the bottom. That's the injector right there. But I mean, every one of these, the O-rings were trash. They were hard as a rock. All of those pintle caps are broke, and I'm really glad I got those out. It did take me a little bit of effort to get them out. I'll come over here to the car. You can see all the holes are empty now. And I've got my new injectors all in the rails. And I've gone around and put that petroleum grease or whatever you want to call it around these O-rings. I'll be able to snap the fuel rail down onto the intake. Now I went ahead and pulled out the PCV grommet, and it's kind of right back here on the back of the intake. And the reason I did that is because one of the main problems with 5 liters when they start pushing out valve cover gaskets, front seals, rear main seals, and stuff like that is because the PCV system is clogged. This is the PCV filter. So this actually drops into that grommet, drops into the back of the intake manifold. And if you see how much oil and carbon and stuff is built up in this thing, there's no way this is getting any flow. So it causes pressure to build up inside the engine. Of course, pressure is going to find the weakest link. Most of the time it's the rear main seal first, then the front main, then the valve cover gaskets. Eventually the back of the intake manifold gasket where it meets the block will start to push out also. So that, I know a lot of people back in the day like rear main seals on these were one of the main failure points for like oil leaks and stuff like that. And a lot of it because nobody ever changed these out. They just assumed that if they change the PCV valve that sits over top of it, that this is fine. But no, this screen has to be changed every so often. Luckily, I think I've got 2 or 3 brand new ones. These are getting very hard to find. I haven't been able to find an aftermarket solution. So if you know of a place that has these, please drop it down into the comments so that I can find it. And just to compare, that's what the new one looks like. And then that's the Ford part number. I haven't checked with a dealer to see if they're still available or not, but it seems like the last time that I bought 4 of these, which I now only have 2 left using this one, that they were discontinued and somehow managed to score 4 of them. But I'm going to go ahead and throw this into the grommet, get it into the intake. I've got everything buttoned up now except for putting the upper on. All my ejectors are in, all the plugs are on. Basically, at this point, I just need to hook up these 2 lines here, which are the heater hoses. There's a vacuum line that runs up here to the purge control. There's a little vacuum that goes over here to the neck on the valve cover. And then that's the source that goes to the intake manifold. And then there's a couple other ones like for the fuel pressure regulator. And then there's, I think there's, yeah, the small one back here, which goes over to the emission stuff, which eventually will probably get deleted off of this car just because it's a pain in the neck with all these vacuum hoses and stuff. But for now, I'm going to leave it all hooked up. I'm going to grab another intake manifold gasket. I know I've got some good ones. This one's the original. They are reusable. It's got tape and stuff all over it. I know I've got a brand new one in the box, so I'll just throw it on there. And then that's the old PCV grommet, which I've got a new one from Dorman, and I'm going to throw that in after I drop this into the intake. It's very difficult to see where this is, but here I'm on the back side of the intake. That gray tube is the fuel rail. The rusted tube in the back is the crossover for the smog passages in the head. But that hole right there, this PCV screen drops into that. The grommet goes over top of it. The PCV valve goes on top of that. Now I'm starting to get somewhere. I've got to hook up all the vacuum lines. So this one up here in the front, it's hard to see, but it goes up to the middle of the plenum up here. That is for the purge control solenoid for the carbon box. And then you've got a source that goes to the back of the intake back here. That line right there, that's your source for your vacuum tee. There's one more vacuum line that comes off the bottom of a T on the back of the plenum right here. That goes over to the PCV valve, which is down inside of there. Of course, now you can see the vacuum line that goes to the fuel pressure regulator right there. Then we got a couple other vacuum lines over here that get hooked up to EGR goes right here. And then I'm pretty certain there's another one. I'm sorry, the EGR goes right there. I'm sure there's 1 or 2 more that I'm missing, but then I can get the throttle cable hooked back up onto the throttle body. Then I can start working my way out from here. This hood, I don't know if you can hear it. Hood's squeaking. It's kind of getting on my nerves. I had one screw that I found was broken off in the plenum, which it is what it is. I can drill that out and get another screw for it. I'm sure I've got some more of those plenum cover screws laying around here somewhere. But for now, the cover will go back on. It'll look okay. I mean, this thing's a filthy mess. The more that I look at this strut tower over here, the worse that it gets. But again, I just want to make this thing run and drive. I want to get it running. I want to have some fun with it this summer. Take it to some cruises and then eventually blow this thing all the way apart and do a full restoration. For now, I'm good. I'm going to continue getting all my vacuum hoses hooked up, and then I'm going to bolt down the plenum, work my way out from there. The plenum is mounted. The cover's on there. All the wiring is buttoned up for the upper. The throttle position sensor, auto air control, EGR, all that stuff is plugged in. So I got the plugs and the wires, and I thought, well, I'm at a point where I could go ahead and try to start this thing and see what it does. And then I thought, well, before I put the mass air meter and the tube and the air cleaner and all that stuff over here, it's a whole lot easier to get in here now to get to the plugs. I'll go ahead and check the plugs. Man, I'm glad I did. So it's hard to see the gap on that thing because my camera won't focus, but I measured that out. It's 65 thousandths. This is supposed to be like 54, 55 tops. So I'm going to go ahead and do the plugs. These are older Champion plugs. And I went ahead and got those NGKs, and they should be good for this. I mean, obviously we're not dealing with a really high performance application, but again, they were cheaper than the Motorcraft copper plugs or the Champion copper plugs. So weird that the NGKs were cheaper, but we'll go ahead and roll with it. So I'm going to start swapping out plugs on this side. So on a Ford, for those that don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then the firing order, I don't remember off the top of my head. I know it's 1, 3, 7, 2, and after that I get lost. So I'll get all of these plugs swapped out. I'll get all of the plug wires swapped out. The cap and the rotor on the distributor, we'll go ahead and change that. So we're going to have nice, shiny, new stuff in here with this really, really dirty engine bay. In fact, when I'm getting down there, if you can see, the exhaust manifold has a massive, like, mud dauber nest on it, which is that clump that's kind of, you can see the holes in that clump down there. So I'm going to get that off. I'm going to try to clean up this engine bay the best that I can. It's a rusty mess. I mean, let's face it, I'm not going to put a ton of miles on this thing this year. I'm just going to enjoy it in local shows because I don't trust it to go that far without the front end of the car falling off. It's bad. There is a massive hole right there, and then I went ahead and cleaned out some of the driver's side stuff that I could grab, and again, just nasty. So I'm going to go ahead and get to that, and then I'll come back when I'm done. So I'm switching out the spark plugs now, and the plug wires, and the cap and rotor, and I ran across something that has caused me an issue in the past, and hopefully this helps somebody out. So this is the rotor that I just pulled out of the distributor. It's a Motorcraft distributor rotor. This goes on the inside. That's what, throws the spark around the inside of the cap to each one of the terminals. I had this problem before, and this is why I checked it. And if I'd have gone forward with just throwing this in here, I would have had the same problem again. So I'm going to set this rotor in here. And it looks like it's, the right one. I mean, it looks pretty decent until you set this one next to it. Now, with those in the same spot, I'm going to get right over top of it. That Motorcraft sticks out about 1/4 of an inch more. What this short rotor causes is a problem where it throws the spark all around the inside of the terminal, or the inside of the cap. It jumps spark around for some reason, and it doesn't get a very good signal, and the spark breaks up, and the engine will not rev over 4,500 RPM. It feels like it has a miss the entire time. So I'm going to take out this one, and I'll send it back or just throw it onto the shelf. And because I don't have any that are the correct length, I'm going to clean up the corrosion on the end of this Motorcraft one and then just go forward with it. I mean, basically, it's just got like a little bit of rust and stuff. If that camera would focus, there's a little bit of rust and corrosion on the end. I'll just get a file and I'll clean that up and we'll put it back in there. But obviously the cap is gone. One of the things I noticed on the cap, and one terminal was completely corroded. That would have not fired at all. There's no way that was getting any kind of spark to it. And so far, all of the spark plugs on this side, 1 through 4, all of them had that same huge gap. All of them looked very old. Hopefully this will help this thing run better. All right, I've got the plenum on. All the plug wires are done. Mass air meter, all the hoses and stuff that go to that. The air filter's in there. Last thing I need to do is put the battery in. I purposely do not have the coil hooked up because I still need to put fuel in this. I want to prime that fuel system. And I want to make sure that this thing actually turns over because I haven't checked to make sure that this engine even turns over. I could have done all of this, and well, when I go to hit the starter here in just a few, it may not do anything. It may not start at all. So I'm hoping that it's good. Of course, the story I was given ran when parked. So we'll see. I'm going to grab the battery, throw it in here. I already see things that I'm not liking. like a wire nut there that goes up to the starter solenoid, and it looks like, yeah, that's the main power feed from the alternator. I'm sure that's flowing a lot of current, so we'll need to address that. This thing has an alarm system on it, so apparently it had some sort of disconnect, like a kill switch or something. So I've got that bypassed. We've got the original starter switch hooked back up. And that's all I can see at this point. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more stuff that's going to pop up once I get into this. So I'm going to put some gas in the tank. I'm going to throw the battery in and then set up the tripod so that I can maybe get this thing starting. All right, so I'm going to walk around here, hook the battery up, put the key in, and see what happens. I've got a fire extinguisher sitting right over there next to the camera, and I can get to it pretty quick because I don't know what's going to happen. So it's the first time I've had the battery hooked up. I'm just going to stand back and look under the hood, make sure I'm not seeing any smoke. Doesn't look like anything's getting hot. That's the part that concerns me the most, is this thing catching on fire. I've got the rear end up and on jack stands, and there's a rental car behind it, so it would be really hard to get this thing down quickly and get it out of the garage. So, all right, battery's hooked up. I'm gonna jump in here. So I don't have the coil hooked up. It's not gonna start this time. I'm gonna just cycle this, and then I'm gonna come back up here and look for some leaks. You got a dome light, that's a plus. Alright, so I'm not getting anything from the cluster. I don't hear the fuel pump cycling. I went ahead and tried to hit the key, and I can kind of hear something back there. I'm going to push the clutch in. Well, that's not good. Sounds like it's hitting the starter, but it sounds like it's locked up. So I'm going to disconnect the battery, and I'm going to grab a socket. I'm going to put it down here on the crank, and hopefully it's just stuck because it was sitting. And hopefully I don't have to pull all the plugs back out and dump a bunch of oil or something down inside the cylinders. Hopefully I can just kind of break it loose and see what's going on. So after watching that clip, I did see very closely, you can see the alternator turning, but it's like it hits and then immediately stops. And that's not me letting off the key. Like, I'm holding the key forward, it hits and then releases. So I'm wondering if it doesn't have something to do with this kill switch or this alarm system, whatever this is that's in here. I went ahead and set it back up the way that they had it. I'm gonna set this right here just to be safe, be careful. I'm gonna go ahead and hit this again and see if maybe the fuel pump comes on now. If it's not this, I've got an idea what it could be. There's several different options on why the fuel pump won't come on. ignition switch in here. So now I'm watching the cluster to see if it builds oil pressure. And it does. Awesome. Okay. Alright. Now the fun part. I gotta take the column apart and get the ignition switch out. So one of the main things that goes wrong on Fox bodies is inside the column. There's a plastic switch that's connected to the key, goes back and forth and slides inside of there. And eventually over time the plastic breaks down and this is what it looks like. So the key is connected to a rod. It moves this switch back and forth and this plugs in under the column, makes connections across these terminals, and that's what starts the car. But this part right here, I bet when I go to take it apart, this metal is going to separate from the plastic and fall apart in the interior. If it's original, it's most likely toast anyway. So what was happening and how I got it to turn over, when I was going to turn the key, it was like going past the start point. And that's why it would make that connection for just a second, enough to turn the motor just a second, and then it would lose the connection. I figured that's, if you heard that one time where I just kind of barely caught it and then it started and then I went past that position, that's how I figured it out. I just kind of played with the key very slowly, turned it forward into the start position. I'm still not hearing the fuel pump kick on, so I've got to look into that and see why my fuel pump's not acting. I'm betting it's because of this. This little switch controls so many things in the electronics of these cars. I've had a car in the past that my turn signals would not work. The radio worked, but the fan blower for like the AC and stuff wouldn't work. So it was like a weird combination of stuff that would work and not work. But like the hazard lights would work, the radio worked. It was just like oddball stuff that didn't work. And when I got into the column to figure out maybe it's this switch, because let's face it, these are like $20. If you own a Fox body, you should keep one in the car somewhere because they're such a nuisance when they go bad. But long story short, it was this problem. So I'm going to get in there. I'm going to get the column loose, all the trim around the column, and I'm going to switch this out. I'll bring you guys in there. This is going to be a long one, and I'm sorry, but this is an adventure, and you're going along with me. So I'm going to get this battery disconnected, which that's not even warm, but I'm glad to see this turned over. I'm glad that I got oil pressure too. That's a big, big hurdle. So, all right, I'm going to grab some tools. All right, I've got the trim around the column removed. It's all held in with screws. The big piece here that goes on the bottom of the column has 3 Phillips screws in it. And then this little piece has 2 Phillips screws. I'm still going to have to take off this trim piece, but I wanted to show you what I found real quick. This is the switch right here. And there you go. It's completely separated, falling apart, just like I said. And it's probably the original, but that's the part that gets moved by the key. And, you know, that's what you get. These are older switches and plastic, and it is what it is. But that's the problem, is that, you know, you can see how corroded these contact points are, and it's just not making contact because the switch is falling apart. It looks like there's even a little spring and a rod and stuff in there too. So I'm going to have to take off the upper column, which it's broke where it meets the dash. I need to take this trim off because there's a couple of screws here and one on the other side, and then there's a brace right there that goes up to the top. I'll get these out of the way and then get that switch changed out. All right, I've got that switch swapped out. That's a security bit T27, a Torx 27. So I've got that out of the way now. I went ahead and plugged in the wiring harness. I'm going to throw the key in and we'll just listen for the fuel pump. All right, so I didn't get that last time. Oh, the radio came on too. I wonder if I can get some sounds out of this. No, Not getting anything out of it. I mean, I can hear beeps and stuff, but I'm not getting any music out of it. All right, well, that's probably a good thing. So, all right, you know what? Now that the fuel pump is primed, I'm gonna prime it just a couple of times, just to make sure. All right, now I'm gonna check for leaks before I fire this up. I'm gonna check all of my injectors. Oh, that looks good. I don't see any fuel pouring out anywhere, which is good. Look under there. Yeah, nothing. Nothing there. All the fuel fittings up here dry. All right. Let's give this thing a whirl. See if it'll start. I got all this trim down here. I don't want to smash it. There we go. All right. All right. It's a whole lot easier if I just put the camera on the tripod and try to do it that way. Plus, I can run around if I do have an issue with something. So the coil's hooked up now. The engine's primed. We got oil pressure. Let's see if it'll start. Smell a little bit of something like exhaust or fuel or something, so I'm gonna double check that we're not leaking anything. I'm wondering if the timing is not off a little bit too. Nothing's leaking. Let's see if I'm getting fuel pressure up here. There's a little Schrader valve that you can take the cover off of on the fuel rail. I need a pick or something to push on the center of it. Probably wouldn't hurt to grab a rag to soak up the fuel. All right, I purged a bunch of air out of the fuel system by removing that cap. I put a rag up here. I've taken all the exposed fuel and stuff out of here because I don't want anything to catch on fire from vapor. I'm gonna give this a shot again. We'll see if it'll fire up. It'd be really cool if it did. All right, there goes the fuel pump. idler pulleys is got a little noise to it, but it's not bad. It's gonna burn off a lot of the stuff that was on the exhaust too. Right back down. Wow. Alright, I gotta get some coolant. I still need to swap out this belt. I'm gonna tuck up my plug wires now that I know it runs. We'll let this, once I get coolant in it, we'll let the radiator fill up and hopefully the thermostat opens. That would be awesome if the thermostat was okay. I didn't have to dive into all that right there. I'm going to shut it off until I get some coolant. Wow. It's a little smoky in here. This thing is just, yeah, we're getting a lot of smoke and stuff from the exhaust and all the soot and dirt, dust, debris, leaves, seeds, all the stuff that's been piled up in this thing for the last God knows how many years. I call that a win. That's pretty impressive. So for now, I think this is a good point to end this video. I know that it runs. I need to find out if it drives, which I'll do another video for that. I did put it in a gear, and I'm getting some noise from the back end that if it is what I think it is, I found a piece of something in the trunk when I was cleaning it out. It's something I'm not very familiar with on these cars, which may surprise you, but I just don't deal with that area of this car very well. So for now, I'm going to clean up this engine bay, get my plug wires situated, put some coolant in the radiator, do my research, and then I'll do the part 2 of will it run and drive of me fixing potentially whatever that issue is, and then putting this down on the ground and actually getting a chance to drive it. Because also need to get tags and insurance and, you know, all those legal things in the meantime. So for now, I wanted to thank everybody for watching. If you made it this far, that's awesome. I know this is a long video. This has been a pretty cool car. I'm very excited about this one. I'm very pleased with the progress that I've got on it. So I thank you all for the subscribes. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for all the likes and the support. And remember to stay gloved up.